Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! Oh, he hit it! Ja Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies win, finally, edition. My name is Keith Parish. On this episode, we will go over the Grizzlies snapping their losing streak by beating the Indiana Pacers. We'll also talk about the conclusion to that awful road trip, the loss at Minnesota. Also going to go over briefly the dumbest Reddit conspiracy in a while and talk about the All-Star player balloting results. First, we can just focus on the Grizzlies getting that much-needed victory. It was a very entertaining second half for the Grizzlies. They completed just their third win of the season when trailing at halftime. It was the biggest comeback they've had all year. They were down 19 to the Indiana Pacers, an Indiana Pacers team who, by the way, is absolutely dreadful when Tyrese Halliburton doesn't play. They hadn't won a road game in forever. And here we are as Grizzlies fans watching our team pull off their first 5-game losing streak since the bubble, go 0-5 on a West Coast trip. We're not exactly brimming with confidence. Desmond Bane is out again, just like Desmond Bane missed the game with soreness, sore knee in the matchup against Minnesota. And the Grizzlies find themselves down by 19 in the second quarter. The Pacers are hitting all kinds of threes. The Grizzlies are not making any of their three-pointers. The Grizzlies are getting yet another zero, basically, from their bench. But from that point forward, the Grizzlies really focus, really push down, and stop subbing out Ja Morant. From the moment they were down by 19, Ja Morant didn't sub out for the entire rest of the game. He goes the distance in the second half, plays all 24 minutes. Jaren Jackson Jr. from that point forward only subbed out for about 2 minutes, came out in the third quarter briefly. So Ja Morant plays 42 minutes. Jaren finishes with 38 minutes played. Huge games from your two best players who were available because the Grizzlies had to stop the losing streak. You could tell. You can tell specifically by that substitution pattern, like we can't mess around. We're not going 10 deep. Sorry, Jake LaRavia. You don't get a play in the second half. The Grizzlies realized they couldn't take Ja Morant out of the game. They had to get a victory. They had to stop the bleeding, and they did it. Ja Morant was absolutely spectacular. Finishes with 27 points, 15 assists, and 10 rebounds. This is his second consecutive triple-double. He also got a triple-double on Friday against the Timberwolves. It's the first time Ja's had consecutive triple-doubles in his career. It's the second time in Grizzlies franchise history a player has had consecutive games with a triple-double. The last time, of course, was the magical DeLon Wright run of April of 2020. Ja Morant now has 5 triple-doubles this season. Coming into this season, if you include the playoffs, he had 5 in his career. Ja Morant becomes the third Grizzlies player in franchise history to have a 25-point, 15-assist game, joining Chucky Atkins and Greg Anthony. That's from Grizzlies PR, that little nugget. By the way, on NBA TV, Greg Anthony was picking his all-star reserves and did not include Ja Morant. Seemed a little bit shocking to me. But Ja Morant was unbelievable in this game, specifically in that second half. He posted 11 assists in the second half against just 1 turnover against the Pacers. his scoring also, like he was just attacking, getting where he wanted. And in this game against the Pacers, where Ja and Jaren led them, Jaren, offensively, a big story of this one, posts 28 points. It seemed apparent from the get-go they were trying to get him the ball early and often. And he was scoring a lot in that first half. He was getting great post position. They were finding him. He was doing his damage in the paint a lot. Sure, he finishes with 5 blocks again. His 10th game this season with 5 blocks or more. That's the most in the NBA. But offensively, he was really the only guy who seemed to have it going on in the first half against the Pacers. And yet, despite that, he wasn't on his way to playing a lot of minutes. He played 13 minutes, which is basically what he usually plays in a half, and had subbed out. And the Grizzlies were getting beat. They were down. Jaren's not in foul trouble. Only has 1 personal foul. And we're like, oh, man, this is tough. We're depending on our depth again. And we don't really have that much dependable depth when Bane and Adams are out. But what happened was Brandon Clark picked up his 3rd foul. So Brandon Clark's in foul trouble. That's the only reason Jaren Jackson Jr. comes back in the first half. The Grizzlies cut it to 10. You know, they finished the half on a relatively strong note. And then in the second half, it is, all right, now we're not going to sub Jaren and Ja out anymore. So while Taylor Jenkins did ride his horses and play Jaren and Ja lots of minutes, they weren't necessarily doing that in the first half. Jaren actually got extra playing time because of Brandon's foul trouble. But however you got there, you got there. That's the important thing. And Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., absolutely spectacular to lead this comeback against the Pacers. Let's go back to the Timberwolves game now. We've posted some of the fun stats, or listed some of the fun stats about the win. Timberwolves game was pretty brutal. Yes, Ja had that triple-double, but you didn't get a lot from anybody else. Jaren Jackson Jr. was 5 for 17 from the field. Missed all 5 of his 3-point opportunities. The Grizzlies as a team only made 8 3-pointers. They were 8 for 33. They committed a disgusting 20 turnovers in that game. Zaire Williams got the start for Desmond Bane. He was mostly quiet, although he made a couple buckets in the second half. He did, by the way, Zaire. Breaking. He picked up 2 loose balls, according to NBA.com, against the Timberwolves. So his streak of not collecting any loose balls came to an end. But the Grizzlies offensively, could only eke out 100 points against the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards was destroying them. Kyle Anderson posted season highs for the Timberwolves with 23 points and 4 made 3-pointers. Also had 6 assists. Kyle Anderson was clowning on our Grizzlies. He picked Ja Morant's pocket, did a no-look pass to Jaden McDaniels for a dunk. It was rough. I was in a dark space after that loss, because that dropped the Grizzlies to 15-15 against the Western Conference. Kyle Anderson basically outscored all the players on the Grizzlies who were tasked with replacing his and DeAnthony Melton's production. Like Zaire had 7 points. Aldama had 5 points, was 1 for 6 from 3. Roddy and LaRavia gave you nothing. They combined for 10 points. And so I was feeling pretty bad after that Timberwolves game, where it's like Kyle Anderson was awesome, and the Grizzlies are in a bit of a tailspin. Whenever Bane doesn't play, they aren't very good. And, they did pick up that win against the Pacers. That brings them to 13-9 on the season when Desmond Bane doesn't play. So your depth clearly shows that it isn't as strong as it has been in previous seasons when you lose these games and when you're missing guys. No Adams, no Bane. Also, Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks had his best game in a while against the Timberwolves, but that's not saying a whole lot. He had 17 points and 4 rebounds, was 7 for 17 from the field, but 2 out of 10 from 3. Dillon also had an awful game offensively against the Pacers. Made just 2 out of 11 attempts, 5 points, and 3 turnovers. In Dillon's last 15 games, he's 22% from 3, averaging 11 points over that span, making just 34.8% of all field goal attempts, course, that three-point shot bringing that number down. This is the worst shooting stretch of Dillon Brooks since the later portions of that 2020 season. February, January of 2020, and then, of course, it led to the bubble a little bit later where he also was not spectacular. But the last time he had a 15-game stretch where he was under 35% from the field was back in 2020. This is back when I was out on Dillon, where I didn't understand how he had such a green light. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you know I'm a pretty staunch supporter of Dillon Brooks right now. And, I still ride with Dillon, but there's no question offensively he is going through it right now. It honestly feels like he's injured. It's so bad on offense. Yeah, there are some bad shot selections, but he usually makes more than this. So the Grizzlies are enduring a really, really cold spell from Dillon Brooks. But still, he brings it on defense. He provides maybe that helpful chaos. And also, the cliff notes for the Dillon Brooks support is you're not going to get anybody better. You're not going to find anyone who can help you on both ends like Dillon Brooks. There definitely aren't better options on the roster right now. I firmly believe that. And if you're trading for somebody, again, I don't think you're going to improve on Dillon Brooks. So this is a nadir Dillon Brooks stretch right now. I don't think it's going to get any worse than this, but certainly Dillon Brooks is playing very, very poorly, which is inconvenient when Desmond Bane is not available and when Steven Adams is not playing. When you're shorthanded, you need all hands on deck, and Dillon hasn't been able to provide that. But luckily, on Sunday against the Pacers, they snap out of that and are able to overcome Dillon's poor game. But after the Timberwolves game, where your bench gave you very, very little, Aldama struggled, Laravia, Roddy, Zaire not giving you much. Tyus Jones really struggled against the Timberwolves. He was 0 for 4 from the field, was scoreless. It's his first scoreless game of the season. And so you're not getting great wing play, and it's just becoming an issue. It's becoming this highlight of like, wow, we are a contender, and we really chose to just, not strengthen our bench. This is, again, the dark space I think a lot of us were in after the Timberwolves game. And winning does assuage a lot of concerns, but of course, beating the Pacers is not that impressive. So at least we can push off those concerns to another day. But at the very least, against the Pacers, like you saw strong games. Zaire Williams, who had a bad first half, had a very nice second half. Zaire Williams knocked down 2 big shots during this 14-0 run in the third quarter. He made a corner 3 on a sidestep that really felt like that got the crowd going. I think that brought the Grizzlies within 8. And at that point, it was like, all right, we got something going on. So Zaire had a much more positive game. The lineup that the Grizzlies used during this run was not their normal lineup. You had Ja Morant, you had Jaren Jackson Jr., you had Dillon Brooks, but then you had Zaire Williams and Xavier Tillman. Because, again, Brandon Clark fighting foul trouble. Xavier Tillman was in there. And notably, Xavier and Zaire's minutes together this year have been terrible. Net rating-wise, terrible. But it got a great boost against the Pacers as the Grizzlies outscored them by 14 in the third quarter when those two guys were on the court. Xavier Tillman, by the way, he did have a pretty solid game against the Timberwolves. One of the only bench guys who really brought it. Against the Timberwolves, Xavier set his career high with 6 offensive rebounds. Against the Pacers, he broke that, set a new career high with 8 offensive rebounds. He was really strong inside, providing those second chance opportunities. Also, so is David Roddy. David Roddy was beastly in the second half against the Pacers. Yeah, he got his normal offensive scores where he would use his shoulders to clear space, made a little 3-4 foot floater, but his offensive rebounding, he was clearing guys out, a big part of the Grizzlies building that momentum and coming back and rallying. So David Roddy, who's been strong or been playing very strongly of late, he fell out of the rotation when they got healthy. He did contribute very nicely against the Pacers. So that was super encouraging. Looking at the lineup data, I find this very, very interesting. All right, Zaire and Xavier's minutes this season haven't been great, but because of the foul trouble, because of those extra minutes that Jaren Jackson Jr. got in the first half when Brandon Clark got in foul trouble, we got to see one of these ultra rare player combinations we don't normally see, and that is Jaren Jackson Jr. playing with Santi Aldama. And like I said, the Grizzlies cut into that Pacers lead at the end of the second quarter with Aldama and Jaren on the court. And now get a load of these statistics, these all-time statistics where Jaren and Santi have played, been very rarely used. According to Cleaning the Glass this season, there have been 37 non-garbage time possessions where Santi and Jaren were on the court. 37 possessions, not really a meaningful sample size. The net rating is great, plus 51. You do a little math. 37 possessions at a plus 51 net rating. That means in real-world talk, in actual points, you outscored the opponent by 19 points. 19 points over 37 possessions, which is great. Last season, get this, Jaren and Santi played 39 possessions together. The numbers were also incredible. You add it all up, the Grizzlies in the past 2 seasons have played Jaren and Santi for 76 total possessions. The score of those 76 possessions is Grizzlies 104, Bad Guys 61, plus 43 points in 76 possessions. The net rating for that is a plus 56.6 net rating. Huge numbers. Of course, that's a small sample size. Virtually meaningless. But I don't think it's meaningless. I think Santi and Jaren is a unique and fun combination that should be played more. And I think if you keep playing it, you'll keep having some success. No, you want to outscore your opponent by 56 points per 100 possessions when you keep playing it. But I thought those stats were particularly notable. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention it, Jaren and Santi did play some in the Warriors game. It was in my notes, and I left it out, so apologies there. But I am intrigued and encouraged by what we've seen so far in the small little sample size. Anyways, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with some more talk about the Grizzlies. Grizzlies fans in the Middle Tennessee area, don't miss the next Nashville watch party hosted by me and John and Chuck from Fast Break Breakfast. We will be at Noble's Beer Hall on Thursday, February 2nd for the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's an early tip, 6:30 p.m. Central. So come out to Noble's Beer Hall. We will be giving away lots of Grizzlies prizes. It'll be a great time for all members of Grizzlies Nation. See you there. Okay, the win against the Pacers improved the Grizzlies to 21-3 at home. That's the best home record in the NBA. They are 17-3 against the East, which is an outrageously good number, winning 85% of your games against the East. Of course, the mirror image of that is, or the flip side to that is 15-15 against the West. In the second half against the Pacers, one of the big catalysts I thought was Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark, who I think has been great as a starter. All of these weird questions we've had to ask because they never played him as the starter, I feel like they've been answered. Brandon's been very, very strong. Yes, he's faced some foul trouble, which is one of the drawbacks of starting, possibly, going up against bigger centers. But Brandon in this game made all 5 of his field goal attempts. He's made 75% of his field goal attempts in the last 3 games. And particularly in the fourth quarter, the Pacers defense was just getting shredded where they kept throwing it to Brandon in the middle of the paint. It wasn't even really a zone, but they would double team Ja a lot. He would just unload it to Brandon, and Brandon kept making the right decision. He would either score with that little 7, 8, 9-foot floater, or sometimes he would pass it. He would assist it to Jaren Jackson Jr. So Brandon Clark played very, very well. The win for the Grizzlies gets them back within 2 games of the Nuggets in the overall conference standings. They are 4 games up on the Kings, who are in 3rd place. Some overall team stats as we take a little maybe overall sample of where the Grizzlies are at right now. Clearly, they just came off a 5-game losing streak, so some of the numbers aren't as good as if we'd taken this check, before that losing streak. But I thought these numbers were interesting as far as the overall offensive and defensive rating. Like, the Grizzlies have the best defense in the NBA, based on defensive rating this season. They held the Pacers to 38 points in the second half, which is incredible. This was the fourth game, by the way. The Pacers win was the fourth game this season where the Grizzlies shot at least 17 percentage points better than their opponent. So the defense has been good. They lead the NBA in defensive rating, but the Grizzlies' defensive rating is actually worse than it was last year when they finished 6th in the NBA. This year, their defensive rating is 109.7. Last year, it was 108.9. The Grizzlies' offensive rating is actually down from last year. This year, they're down a half of point per 100 possessions, which isn't a lot. Obviously, it's very, very close. They're 113.8 offensive rating, which is 12th in the NBA. Last year, their effective field goal percentage, remember they were 23rd, not very, very good. Their effective field goal percentage is slightly higher this year, but still it ranks 23rd. Their true shooting percentage this season is up from 55.3% last year to 56% this year, but they've dropped in the overall league rankings. Last year, they were 24th in true shooting percentage. This year, they are 26th in true shooting percentage. Although all these stats, it's hard to read a ton into them because the Grizzlies, like a lot of teams, keep not having their full-strength squad. I mean, I think one thing that we can take away from the Pacers win is something that we've already believed, but it was proven to us. Our top-line talent is elite. In the playoffs, are they going to play Ja 42 minutes and Jaren 38 minutes? I certainly hope so. Are Desmond Bane and Steven Adams going to be available in the playoffs? Well, that's all that matters. I mean, health is everything. That's why the Grizzlies don't play their guys very many minutes during the regular season. Now, has that worked out? It doesn't seem like it. Seems like the Grizzlies have terrible injury luck with the amount of care that goes into limiting their minutes and giving everyone on the team playing opportunities. But with the Grizzlies at full strength, I think they still are one of the best teams in the NBA, despite that horrible road record and that not good record against the Western Conference. Let's talk about this Jaren Jackson Jr. Reddit video. I don't know if you missed it or not, or a Reddit thread. There was a thread on Reddit about, was the Grizzlies home scorekeeper cooking the books and crediting Jaren with more blocks than he actually made? And is it a conspiracy to help Jaren Jackson Jr. win Defensive Player of the Year? Now, I like things that are in regards to player stats and the way they're recorded. And so when I saw this post, someone sent it to me early Saturday morning. It's like before I logged on to Twitter. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I want to see what this is all about. When I started reading the post, initially I'm like, my initial response was, because it was just home and road splits. Yes, Jaren's home and road splits are wildly different as far as the number of blocks. When I first read the stats, my initial reaction was, this is really stupid. We watch all the games. I watch all the games, usually twice. Jaren blocks way more shots at home. There's nothing fishy about this at all whatsoever. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe there has to be, because of how much traction this seems to be getting, surely there's a smoking gun in the video clips provided. And then I started watching the video clips. And all the video clips just showed me that whoever put this together doesn't pay that much attention to how NBA statisticians work and stats are recorded. Like, does this person not play fantasy basketball and not know what gets recorded as a block shot and a steal? Do they not bet player props? All of it to me was like, these plays have been correctly recorded. I thought it was so strange. And then everyone's talking about it. Like, oh, wow, something fishy. 4 blocks per game at home, 2 blocks on the road. It's like, guys, we can all literally watch every single Jaren Jackson Jr. block. Every person without a subscription can go to NBA.com/stats, click on Jaren's block totals, and there's a video clip of every one. Yes, Kirk Goldsberry and Kevin O'Connor found a couple of blocks out of all of them. We're like, you know what? I'm not sure about this one. But it was the weirdest, dumbest thing. Again, home road splits mean nothing. Home road splits when a guy's played 30 games mean less than nothing. Small sample size. So it was a very bizarre story. I personally like the new theory that someone who's a Grizzlies person planted this to make everyone who votes for Jaren Jackson Jr. awards watch all of Jaren's blocks this season. Like, Jaren got 2 blocks and 2 steals against the Timberwolves, which is great. But then he comes back and gets 5 blocks against the Pacers, Like, oh, is there a conspiracy? No, you could watch all the blocks. He blocked the shots. Shout out Pete Pranica with their real and their spectacular call after Jaren getting his 4th block.
Jaren spikes that one back. 4th block for the Block Panther.
I saw all 4 of them, too.
They were real and they were spectacular.
One of the dumbest conspiracies I've ever seen. Yeah, it is weird if you've never looked at block shots before, if you've never looked at steals and the ways they're recorded. It can be confusing sometimes, and it just showed that a lot of people just don't know how things are tracked or recorded. Finally, let's talk about the player balloting. I went over a lot of this on Fast Break Breakfast last week. Definitely go listen to Fast Break Breakfast's episode last Friday with Katie Heindel. We talked about the player balloting for the NBA All-Star Game. I thought it was a little bit notable that some Grizzlies players finished pretty well among the player vote. Of course, Ja Morant finished 3rd in the overall combined fan plus media plus player vote for Western Conference guards. But I thought it was notable that Desmond Bane finished 9th in the player vote, behind Steph and Luka and Ja and Shea and Damian Lillard and De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker and Anthony Edwards. Tied with Spencer Dinwiddie, but all those 8 guys, you wouldn't be offended or find it objectionable that he was behind those guys. In the front court, Jaren actually finished 9th among player voting. He was behind Jokic and LeBron and Zion and Larry Markkanen, Domantas Sabonis, Paul George, Anthony Davis, and Jeremy Grant. Steven Adams was right behind Jaren in the player vote. He was 10th, tied with Christian Wood. Also thought it was notable, Dylan Brooks got 14 player votes to be an all-star starter. That made him 17th in the Western Conference for the front court players. That's the same number of votes that Draymond Green got. It's more votes than Andrew Wiggins got. I thought all that was very, very interesting. Anyways, the Grizzlies are back at it on Wednesday night. They play the Portland Trailblazers. It's a home game. It's at 6 o'clock. Heads up, weird start time. They're playing at 6 o'clock this Wednesday because they have a back-to-back on Thursday that starts at 6:30. By the way, that Thursday game is a Grizzlies watch party in Nashville. Second night of a back-to-back road game against the Cavaliers. Not great, but we will still have a Grizzlies watch party over at Noble's Beer Hall. Come on out, hang with me and John and Chuck from Fast Break Breakfast. I'll be giving away some Grizzlies prizes, so hopefully I will see you there. Anyways, thanks for listening. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please write me a 5-star review in whatever podcast app you are listening on. Hope you have a great Monday. Talk to you soon. Go Grizz.